Hi everybody, welcome back to Chrysalis Books. My name is Jessica and I manage the Lovestead, which is my urban homestead where I do a lot of reading. The topic of today's video is a wrap-up of what I read in October. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. This video is coming to you kind of late in the month for a wrap-up of October, but it's just because I have not had much mental or emotional energy to film and edit and all of the things that go along with making a video because of the election and things going on in my country. I've just been kind of emotionally exhausted, so I've been reading a lot, but I just haven't been filming and talking about them. And you know, I kind of want to say, if like you're a booktuber or any human being who is in a similar position where you're just feeling exhausted by everything that's going on right now, like today it is November the 5th and we still don't have a president determined. It's stressful. At least it is for me. And I know that it is for a lot of people. And so I just want to say that if you are a person who is feeling similar types of exhaustion and drainage of emotions, then like, it's okay to take some time, and it's okay to not always be hustling through like work and whatever. I feel like I'm getting way off track here, but let's get into the books that I read in October, because I did read a lot, because one of the things that helps fill my cup when I am feeling drained like that is to read and just kind of escape everything that's going on. And right now I feel like a lot of people are needing a lot of escapism. So in October I read, I didn't even count them, 6 books. The first one that I read was Breakfast at the Honey Creek Cafe by Jody Thomas. I read this on my Kindle, so I don't have a copy of the book, but I'll leave a photo of the cover here. I checked this book out from my local library through Overdrive, which is their lending system for ebooks and audiobooks. And it was published in 2020, so this year, 336 pages. It's considered an adult romance. So this book, I'm going to read you just the Goodreads blurb of what it's about. So Piper Jane McKenzie, mayor of Honey Creek, won't let a major scandal rip her quirky hometown apart or jeopardize her dream of one day running for higher office. So she's willing to welcome undercover detective Colby McBride. Talking is hard today. She's willing to welcome undercover detective Colby McBride, hired to help solve the mystery behind her wannabe fiance's disappearance. Colby's cover is that he's an old boyfriend now begging Piper for a second chance, always when there are plenty of townsfolk around to witness his shenanigans. So this is basically about this Mayor Piper who, her friend, who the press says is her fiance, goes missing. And it's a major scandal within the town because the town sheriff also goes missing. And so Colby McBride is hired as a PI to come in and try to figure out what's going on undercover. And I actually DNF'd this book. For those of you not familiar with the phrase DNF, who aren't, you know, my regular booktube people, DNF stands for did not finish. So I didn't finish this book, and it wasn't necessarily because it was a bad book. Like, the book itself was fine. Reading it felt like watching a Hallmark movie, and that it was pretty cozy and romantic, and just, you know, it wasn't a bad book. I keep saying that. It just wasn't good enough for me to want to spend time finishing it. I wasn't invested in the characters. I wasn't invested in the plot. And it just wasn't for me. But I do think that people out there who enjoy kind of a more lighthearted story that's not real hard-hitting, that doesn't address major social issues, that just kind of focuses on a mystery and a light love story, you might enjoy this. You might really like this. I didn't. But again, I'm not saying that it was bad. It just wasn't right for me. So I didn't finish it, but I gave it 2 stars because I felt like, it was put together enough to be a publishable piece of writing, but I just didn't love it. The next book that I read in October was Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, and I apologize, I should have looked this up, but I don't know if it's Gillian or Gillian Flynn. Please correct me in the comments down below. This book was published in 2009. It's 370 pages, and it is considered to be a thriller. So let me read you the blurb. Libby Day was 7 when her mother and 2 sisters were murdered in the Satan sacrifice of Kinnicky, Kansas. She survived and famously testified that her 15-year-old brother Ben was the killer. 25 years later, the Kill Club, a secret society obsessed with notorious crimes, locates Libby and pumps her for details. They hope to discover proof that may free Ben. Libby hopes to turn a profit off her tragic history. She'll reconnect with the players from that night and report her findings to the club for a fee. As Libby's search takes her from shabby Missouri strip clubs to abandoned Oklahoma tourist towns, the unimaginable truth emerges, and Libby finds herself right back where she started, on the run from a killer. I really enjoyed this book. So Libby is an interesting character. She's not super lovable. This trauma in her life has clearly damaged her, and not in the way that you might think. Like, she's not like sad and crying all the time, right? And she's also not traumatized in that she's hypervigilant. But the trauma has affected her in her executive functioning. So executive functioning for people is the ability to hold a job, to get up in the morning, to do your personal hygiene, to make decisions. That trauma has basically annihilated her executive functioning. And she has lived on the life insurance from that event, like from her mother being killed, etc. So she's lived on that life insurance. She's lived on donations from the public for people who just like felt sorry for her. And then she also wrote like a tell-all book, and she's lived off the profits of that. But her money is starting to run out, and she's getting desperate to find ways to earn money without having to actually hold a job because she cannot function. And so this Kill Club, one of the people from the Kill Club contacts her, and this Kill Club is like a club of people that are obsessed with true crime stories, like the JonBenét Ramsey story. And they had this convention near where Libby lives, where there's like different booths for these different crimes, and she's brought in to be the keynote speaker for this event. And they really kind of test her on like what actually happened when that massacre occurred, because she was just like in a closet and she didn't completely see everything, but she ends up testifying that her brother Ben did it, even though she didn't technically see him doing it. So members of the Kill Club really want to get Ben out of jail because, you know, there's like these women who are in love with him and convinced that he's innocent and all of this. But basically she tells them that like, okay, yeah, I'll go find information on this if you pay me $500 for talking to this person, or you pay me $1,500 to going to that place. And it's like her new way of making money. And she also like sells some memorabilia, like a diary entry of her little sister. She'll sell it to someone in the Kill Club and that kind of thing. So but it takes her on this wild journey of her past and figuring out what did happen, and forces her to kind of revisit some moments from that time in her life that she didn't necessarily want to revisit, revisiting people from that time in her life that she didn't necessarily want to revisit. And it was so well done. The book is also told from multiple perspectives and multiple timelines, similar to how Into the Water was with by Paula Hawkins. I talked about that in my September wrap-up, which I'll leave a link to up here. But Paula Hawkins did that, where she had multiple timelines told from multiple perspectives, but that was really messy and confusing. Gillian Flynn does that much more effectively in Dark Places, and I loved this book. It was dark, like it lived up to the name, Dark Places, because it was so dark in certain spots, and it made me really uncomfortable. in certain places. But I thought it was an excellently crafted thriller, an excellently crafted novel. It's not super suspenseful in that, like, you're not like waiting to see what happens next around the corner, but it keeps you interested because you just want to know, like, what's the next little tidbit of information that she's going to uncover, and how is that going to affect her and shape how she accesses her memories of the event. And it's just a really, really well done novel. So I gave it 4 stars out of 5. All right, the third book that I read in October was Scottish Ghost by Lily Seafield. This was published in 2000 and nope. It was published in 1999, and it's 192 pages. It was okay. Nobody talks about this book, and now I know why nobody talks about this book, because it just was okay. Like, she goes through and talks about different folklore, different ghost stories from Scotland, and it's kind of like a campfire story, but less interesting and less fun. Just kind of a dry history of these different types of folklore and ghosts and things. And I didn't really love it. I mean, I thought it was interesting enough to read from a historical perspective, but I thought that she really missed an opportunity here to write something really great, and it really fell flat. So I gave this 2 stars out of 5. Next, I read Iron Kissed by Patricia Briggs. This is the 3rd book in Patricia Briggs' Mercy Thompson series. It was published in 2008, and it is 287 pages long. I am doing this as part of a video series where I'm reviewing book series, and so I'll hold off on doing an in-depth review of this book until we get to that video. And for now, I'll just say I gave it a rating of 3 out of 5 stars. I was on track to give it 4 out of 5, and then the ending happened and it bumped it down to 3 out of 5. So I'll tell you more about that in an upcoming video. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. The 5th book that I read in October was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I read this on my Kindle, checked it out from the library, and I don't have a copy of it, but I will give you a picture of the cover here. This book was published this year in 2020. It is 304 pages long, and I loved it. This is a Gothic horror story, and the protagonist's name is Noemi. She gets a letter, or not, she doesn't. Her father gets a letter from Noemi's cousin, Catalina. Catalina has married into this white colonialist family, and she writes this letter that's just a bunch of nonsense, which makes her father, Noemi's father, really worry about Catalina, and he wants Noemi to go visit Catalina to see if they can get her into a mental asylum or a mental hospital, or just get her some kind of help, because this letter just doesn't make any sense at all. So Noemi goes to where Catalina lives in Mexico, which is like this small little town in Mexico, and the house that Catalina lives in is called High Place, and it was originally built by her husband and her husband's family. This book is a real slow burn, but it's so good, and it is very Gothic, which is awesome if you really like Gothic literature. The house is described in ways that make it very Gothic and spooky, and the family themselves that Catalina married into, they're creepy. So before you even know any supernatural stuff about them, you know that they're really into eugenics. Sorry, my goldfish is distracting me. So before you know anything about the family in terms of supernatural stuff, you do learn that they're really into this concept of eugenics. And it really comes from like this deeply rooted colonialism and racism. And like even without supernatural storylines, that in itself is scary enough to read about. Noemi, like this young Mexican woman, going into this house run by racist colonialists. Ugh. 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 But Noemi herself is a really interesting character. She's very much a spitfire. Like she it comes from a privileged background. Her family's very wealthy, and she knows that they have a certain amount of socio-political clout and power, and she wants to go in and use it. And I loved that about her. Like, I loved her confidence, and I loved her assertiveness. I thought that she was just everything that I wanted her to be. So Noemi's a really wonderful character. The story is creepy. There's a certain part within the story that is so disgusting that I had to actually take a break, walk away, and come back to it because it was just so gross. So definitely lives up to the horror genre, definitely lives up to the gothic literature genre. And I loved that it's told from the perspective of this young Mexican woman. So there are elements of diversity in there as well. Just a very well done novel. I enjoyed it immensely, and I gave it 4 stars out of 5. The last book that I read in October, okay, I have to pull it in here for a second because this book made me feel a certain way. And it was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. This book came out in September 2020. It is 336 pages long. It is classified as an adult book, but is not. I have a lot of issues with this book. I am going to film a separate video about this book being a good illustration of what happens when capitalism seeps into art, of what happens when the publishing world is exploitive. So if you want some drama in your life, keep an eye out for that video. I also read this on my Kindle from the library. I don't have a photo, or I don't have a copy of the book, so I will give you a photo of the cover here. A Deadly Education is about this school called the Scholomance, where witches and wizards attend when they're a certain age, because at a certain age they start to really develop their magical powers. They have this sort of energy about them called mana, and it makes all of these supernatural monsters want to eat them. And so supposedly the Scholomance is created as a way to protect these kids, because there's magic that surrounds it that makes it harder for the monsters to get in, but they still get in. So it's like a dangerous place where you could be eaten by a monster at any point. It's also a school without teachers. So it's a school without teachers, and I didn't like that because like part of the joy of a school is the teachers. Basically the way that the students learn is they have in their dorm rooms a void, which is like a blackness, and they'll say what they need into the void, and then the void will spit out resources for them. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like a commentary on online education, the way that we use the internet as the void. We type in what we want from the void and it spits out some results for us. I don't know if that's what she's trying to say there. But the void will spit back like a book of spells or whatever, you know. And that's how the students learn. They're basically all self-taught and could die at any moment because there are monsters around every corner. The main character is Galadriel, who goes by Elle. And she's ticked off because there's another student named Orion who saves her. Like, saves her multiple times, and that makes her mad, I guess. And every student has a skill that they're particularly good at or that they're like blessed with. Her skill is mass destruction. And so because of that, she puts out this energy of just being like this terrible person and nobody really likes her. But she also doesn't help herself because she doesn't like anybody and she doesn't try to like anybody. She doesn't try to know anybody. She doesn't try to be a likable person whatsoever. And I think we're supposed to believe that it's because she's got this trait of mass destruction, that like being a decent human doesn't come naturally to her, but whatever. So basically, like, the main character is not likable at all. Like, I don't care if she dies in this book. Like, yeah. And the majority of this book is world building. Like, very little actually happens. Orion saves her from some monsters every now and again. The end. This book is not character driven. This book is not plot driven. This book is info dump driven, because that's all it is an internal monologue. She just is info dumping and world building through this. In Naomi Novik, I should say, is info dumping through Galadriel's internal monologue. Like, the book literally will have like the start of an action scene and then this really long internal monologue, world building, talking about spells, how the magic works, motivations, thinking through things, and then it'll go back to the action scene. But by the time you're like back at the action scene, you've gone on such a long world building distraction that the action has lost any impact and like you don't care anymore. I hated this book. I thought it was terribly, terribly written. I thought that it read more like reading Naomi Novik's notes or her outline than an actual finished piece of literature. It felt like she rushed through the publication process instead of taking the time to create a good piece of writing. She just rushed through what she had. And I don't know, maybe she didn't do that. I can't say, but that's what I felt like when I read it. Yeah, I hated the the voice that the writer used, Naomi Novik used. The voice of the character is so immature that I don't understand how this is classified as adult. There's literally nothing adult about this book. Nothing. The main character is a teenager. All the characters are teenagers. The voice is the voice of a teenager. Nothing adult happens in terms of gore. Nothing adult happens in terms of romance. Like, this is not an adult lit. But they classified it as adult lit so they could charge you $28. Like I said, I'm going to go into a more detailed video about this and share some thoughts on exploitation in the publishing world and capitalism in the art world. And I'll talk more about that there. But I did give this book 1 star out of 5 because I hated it. Okay, that is what I read in October. Hopefully this video makes sense. I'm getting a headache just thinking about Deadly Education. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!